Well, hello, this is Jeff, and I'm actually doing a review of the Bigme Galley, the Kickstarter campaign with the Goody Reader today. So it's been set up, I've used it for a couple of weeks, and I have some thoughts. Some are good, some are bad. Obviously, the writing and then some of the core functionality works pretty well as expected, right? Like I can take pretty pretty smooth notes. The feel of the paper is great. There are a few problems though with the Wacom styles. Here, I'll turn my little camera off so you can just look at the galley. There you go. But there are a few problems. There are some dead spots in the registration, where certain times the Wacom will not register a touch. Likewise down here. The case that it comes with is fine. It's applicable. Doesn't really help for standing up. I've had to get a separate plug-in keyboard that plugs in USB-C with its own little stand in order to do writing on it in the more traditional sense. So those are some of the high-level things. The biggest problem, in my point of view, with the Bigme Galley is the firmware. The Galley firmware is not great. It's extremely battery consumptive, right? Like there's a high likelihood that this battery will be down from 100 because I just unplugged it for this video to 95. If it's not, it's going to be soon, like within minutes. It's crazy. So that is one thing to be aware of. The battery life is terrible. I've had to have this plugged in all the time, and a lot of it I do believe is because of the firmware. It's just not great. Notes work as expected. He's trying to save battery. I have it on like extreme battery saver mode. But yeah, notes work as expected. They're not the most seamless note experience, so I would kind of, if you really wanted to take notes, the meeting records is a cool idea. I tried to use it at a church sermon recently, and the transcription didn't really work well. I got some great notes, but essentially it's just a reskin on the note apps with a recorder attached. So it doesn't really do too much on its own. In terms of books and color, um, you know, I think the color screen does what you hope. Here, I'll open up Pride and Prejudice. And so it looks fantastic, and the colors do look really good. Despite what folks say, good e-reader or whatever, um, it's not perfect in terms of some greens are washed out. There is a little bit of margin of error, I would say. Um, I initially missed the bottom Android bar with like back home and stuff like that, but over time I've gotten more, accepting of it. Here, I'll open up this one. I don't know what book this is, but it has a cool cover. Look at that. So pretty, so beautiful. So it does look really nice. And so like the galley screen is great. The way it refreshes is actually not problematic. And I'll show you all. I've even played like Marvel Snap on this, and it's worked. Um, I won't go into like too much because it'll take a while to load, more because Marvel Snap's a humongous game rather than the fact that this thing can't handle it. I mean, it's not beautiful, but that looks pretty great. And obviously it'll refresh a few times. I just have it turned up. It actually works better in extreme mode than I even anticipated. Extreme mode is kind of the not extreme. Sorry. HD mode is kind of the way to have this. The refreshes aren't that problematic with the speed of the refresh now. And then you know, the extreme mode has way an enormous amount of staining, so it's really not worth it. In terms of like touchscreen activity, it's a little laggy, and like if I click on my rank or something here, it takes a second for just the touchscreen to even respond. Um, you can hear the Marvel music in the background there. Better turn it down or else I'm gonna get in trouble. But yeah, I mean, like I think it's you know, it's not perfect, but I've definitely played games of Marvel Snap on this, and I've had a good time. In terms of the lighting and night modes, there are pinpricks, right? Like you can see, and I'll turn the light up here. You can see like the light and dark parts where the LEDs are, and I know it's pretty well distributed, but it is something to be aware of. It's not quite as seamless as I think it's advertised on sites like Goody Reader. Um, but I get it, right? They want to hype up their own thing. In terms of like the Android functionality, multitasking is a bit of a problem. I have to, if I have a few apps open, let's go back here. If I go to, let's say, I open up Slick Deals, if I'm looking for a deal here, whatever. Um, if in order to kind of clear out memory and reduce some of the uh, multi-app purposes, I have to go all the way up to like to like this drop-down menu, which takes because the touchscreen's a little wonky. It takes a few tries. Come on, yeah, touchscreen hates me sometimes. Um, all right, I'll go home and then I'll do the drag down. Come on, give me that e-ink center. Yeah, it's really hating me today. Here we go. Okay, there we go. And then I will have to go to process management here in order to close, like, probably one of the reasons it's slow is because it's still running Marvel Snap in the background. And this thing is not like the, most overpowered device ever. Um, so clearing those processes out takes some time. It's a bit of a headache. The other issues that I think are prevalent is I do think that the e-ink center is a little frustrating. I like that it can set up for particular apps, but there's not an easy way to say for all the apps, please just scroll down. Scroll down. Is it going to even do it? Yeah. Talk about demoing it. But let's see if I can get this to work. Man. But overall, I mean, I think this is a fine thing. Like it works. It does reading and note taking pretty well. I have it on my desk as kind of a quick note taking because I can leave it plugged in because the battery drain is bonkers bad. The firmware is problematic. It's not that great. I don't know what speed up is, but I don't think I want to touch it. Yeah, but like a lot of these things, like if you go to the settings and you turn on, oh hey, I want you to be more efficient. Like I want like battery life to be on. It just turns it on airplane mode, which is kind of frustrating. So there's a lot of firmware issues. The firmware isn't ideal. Um, it doesn't adapt whether it's plugged in or not. Like these types of like precision things are really an issue. If I try to get its book reader to actually get the audio reader, it takes me to their app store, which, I can kind of decipher what means what because it's all in Chinese. But if I go to this little headphone icon, try to download the book reader, go to download the app market on the voice plugin, takes me to the Bigme app market, and I can say yeah. So I see like this is the application I want. I can kind of tell what characters are what. It's this one here. Click install, and it just kind of goes to pause download. So again, application. So again, still a few issues, and the firmware is the thing that's dragging this device down. I feel like this is a really good device. The one thing the firmware does, I mean, like scan document, stuff like that, that's kind of, you know, whatever. Like the text to speech, and like I know this thing brags about having a lot of AI functionality, but it's really not that fancy. The AI text to speech and like the meeting recording and stuff like that is pretty mediocre. So like they'll say, oh, we have great AI when you transcribe your notes, when you transcribe audio. That is not the case. It is pretty poor. It's like, AI from 2 to 3 years ago, rather than the stuff that's like, writing your blog posts for you. So again, like they do have ChatGPT on here, but it's essentially just a plugin to ChatGPT, right? Like it's just, queuing up their API, and like writing something to an API isn't super hard. Other annoying things, like in order to change my screensaver, I had to go to the screensaver app rather than in my settings. So like a few settings things are tucked away on has apps in the app menu, which is kind of strange. But yeah, overall, I think this device delivers as a reader and a note taker. But I'm already at 97 battery, and if I was like typing or writing on this, it would be even lower. So the other issues are like I think the thing that makes this device something I would not recommend is the battery life and the firmware. I think the firmware is forgivable and hopefully it's something that gets updated, but the battery life is I mean like on the specs this is like a 3000 milliamp hour battery. So it shouldn't be, I think that's what it is. I don't know how they do it. 3 amp hours, whatever. Um but it shouldn't be draining this quickly, especially on an e-ink screen, which is kind of shocking, right? And then, I do use tools like Google Docs, which is nice. I can plug in a keyboard, but again, I have to have a separate keyboard. So it is a little bit frustrating. I definitely think if you want a e-ink device, you should go with the Tab Ultra Color. I think with the Kaleido 3 screen, I think that's the way to go. This is a cool device. I think it does some things okay. The fact that its screen, even in note taking, is kind of glitchy and it doesn't register all the keystrokes. It just does a lot of things, but does none of them really well, except for using the Galley screen, which is great. But again, Bigme as a manufacturer seems to be having some issues. So that's my review. I know it's a little grim, but I think this device has a lot of stuff going for it in terms of um, you know, the specs of the device, but how it's executed in terms of firmware, battery life, and some of those other things. I think there is a lot to be desired. So yeah, interesting app. I think there's some. I mean, it's not like if you bought it, you won't go home crying. I'm not crying about buying it, but I would definitely recommend, like the multitasking is really poor. There's not like a nice Tab Ultra keyboard type plug-in thing, which is kind of a bummer. Pen and screen configuration's wonky, and that's in like the core note-taking reader bits. And then, just the, the battery life and the firmware that's draining that battery life and also making it difficult to just manage an Android environment, um, probably makes this a not recommend. But anyways, I hope this is helpful to you in your buying purchases for tablets and things. I would definitely recommend looking elsewhere, but this is a cool one, and if you buy it, you won't be sad, but there's probably things that will make you happier. Anyways, hope that's helpful. Bye bye.